because you're aware that what you're saying isn't true. You realize that what you're saying, and specifically the way in which you're living, it's not in harmony with the natural world. It's not in harmony with the universe. Because the universe is kind of characterized by one thing, which is truth. And as soon as we start going against this, we're now going against the universe. And it's a really, really, really weird thing. Where do we come from? The universe. Yeah, so in other words, when you're fighting against truth and you're fighting against the universe, you're essentially fighting against yourself. So once we stop living by truth, we're now living in a place that is completely contrary to our actual nature. And then surprise, surprise, we feel like we don't belong. Well, you don't belong. If you're a liar, then you don't belong in a universe that's governed by truth. If you're a truth teller, you don't belong in a universe that's governed by lies. Because it should cause you to ask yourself, how can they get me to say something that's so obviously contrary to the truth? Why would I go along with that? It's just easier. Is that the purpose of your life? Easiness? Simplicity? Because if it was, I don't know why any of us are here. Why aren't we just laying in bed all day? Is the purpose of our life to feel good? If so, why aren't we just drunk in bed all day? But we realize intuitively that that's not the function of life. That's not the purpose of life. We realize that there's something much deeper there, and that is to live in accordance with the truth. It's going to cost you sometimes to tell the truth. It's also going to cost you to live in a world in which you don't tell the truth. Stop me if you've heard this before. That's because life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer. You get to choose what you're going to suffer for. I guess that's the question. What are you going to suffer for? Are you going to suffer for the truth? Or are you going to suffer for lies? Remember, the truth is the thing that builds the universe up. The lies are the things that try to tear down what the universe is. The idea that God is somebody who takes chaos and makes order out of it. Then what's a devil? It's a person who undoes the process, takes order and tries to create chaos out of it. 2 plus 2 clearly equals 4. Well, but not if you look at it this way. Let's redefine some words. Well, yeah, if you redefine words, then this is the one I'm wearing on my wrist is a banana. But that doesn't mean I can eat it. And it doesn't take a lot to tear down, because any third grader could also, if you gave him a sledgehammer, destroy the statue of David by Michelangelo. And so what they do is something for the rest of us. They go out, they live in the chaos, they survive it, they come back and they tell us about it. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they give us a really catchy chorus along with it. And then that becomes like the soundtrack of our youth. That becomes the soundtrack of your adulthood. It becomes the soundtrack of some of the most beautiful experiences of your life. And also the soundtrack of some of the most miserable experiences of your life. But every experience of your life has a soundtrack, doesn't it? So this word is, right here in the middle, happiness is. When you see that word in a sentence, most of the time it can function like as an equal sign. Like you'd say A is A. You know, the two things on each side of the word is are equal to each other. In this case here, he's giving us a definition of happiness. So how do you know when you're happy? Well, it's when what you think, what you say, what you do are in harmony. And so it isn't necessarily a feeling, but the feeling will come from when those three things are lined up, if that makes sense. So we can think of kinds of things that people will say. I guess in the case of Einstein, we can use that. So what he said was he's a pacifist. So war is never the answer. And by the way, if anybody believes this, let me know. If you think that fighting is never the answer, please let me know. Have your wallets and purses ready, because I'm going to rob you. And I imagine you're not going to fight with me, right? Because war is never the answer, fighting is never the answer. And you won't call the police either, right? Because then they're going to come and fight with me. And fighting is never the answer. I'd be surprised if any of us actually believe this. This is a privilege or a luxury of living in a society where you can walk down the street without getting punched in the face. But certainly what he said was different from what he thought. Einstein was thinking, hey, we should never fight unless, and there was an asterisk that was there in his thinking that he never knew was there before. It wasn't until he was actually faced with real evil that he suddenly had to make a decision about how you deal with real evil. And then, of course, what he did was he signed the letter and wanted to drop the bomb. And so was Einstein happy with this decision? No. We're told that he anguished about this for years, for a long time. It haunted him the rest of his life because these three things were not really in line. And so one of the reasons that they may not have been in line was because he probably never really thought too much about it. Again, when you live in a world that, I mean, after World War I, it's difficult for us to imagine, but that was a horrible war. And people around the world really believed that the war was so terrible that there would never be another war again, because countries saw the toll of it. The idea was that our technology had gotten us to a point where it no longer made sense to go to war, because it would just cost too much. Too many people would die. So the idea was now we're forced to negotiate with each other, work things out. So the idea of ever having a fight again was probably, to him, to Einstein, was a very elevated idea. We've now evolved past this need in our lives. And this is a mistake that we as humans make from time and time again. This idea that, today we are so educated, and today we are so smart, we're so wise, these things can never happen again. So therefore we start taking really stupid positions that don't have to actually align with reality. And this would be one, for example, on Einstein's part, the idea of pacifism. So if you believe that you're never ever going to have to fight for the rest of your life, then it makes sense for us to, take that high moral ground and just say, we should never fight. And we all kind of all clap. That's right. Until the bully walks in the room. And then what? Well, we still will not resist them. Okay, and then when you're all dead, now what? And they go, and after that, they're going for your families. They're going for your friends. At what point do you ever stop the bullying? And if the answer is never, well, then you're just seeding the whole world to ruin. I don't know anybody who honestly, genuinely believes that. Yeah.
So basically, there's people who make up walls from what you say and what you think and what you do, and there's no fluidity. So we make up walls, and it causes disharmony in us.
Yeah, and if you think about it in Jungian terms, you've got the shadow and the persona. The things that you're saying, well, that's your shadow, that's your persona. That's the stuff that you're showing the world. I am a pacifist, but in his head, we don't know what he's really thinking. This would be kind of like the shadow things. I don't know if he ever realized that the letter that he signed to the president would become public. Maybe he thought that that was something that would remain hidden, because it was for quite a while. And so now there's a disharmony between his persona and his shadow. Now it's not quite the same thing as the Jungian shadow, but the concept is still the same. That you've got these parts of yourself that are hidden from the world, and then you've got this thing that you show the world. And there's a disharmony there. If you remember from Jung, he talks about how this disharmony between the shadow and the persona is what leads to a lot of mental health issues. Anxiety, stress, depression, because you're not kind of in alignment. As soon as you can get the shadow and the persona in alignment, in other words, once you individuate and then you can assimilate those two aspects of yourself, well, now you can avoid a lot of the mental health crises that we have today. But this kind of disunity is what causes it, because you're aware that what you're saying isn't true. You realize that what you're saying, and specifically the way in which you're living, it's not in harmony with the natural world. In fact, I guess we can think of it that way. It's not in harmony with the universe, because the universe is kind of characterized by one thing, which is truth. We talked before about how if it's a bet between you and the universe, we're always going to bet on the universe, because truth always wins out. And so we kind of intuitively know this, which is why lying is such a difficult thing, because you're going to get found out eventually. Even if you think that you're not going to get found out about this one specific lie, eventually you'll get found out about being a liar, and then there are the consequences that go along with that. But the universe maintains this thing of truth, and as soon as we start going against this, we're now going against the universe. And there's a really, really, really weird thing. Where do we come from? Whether you're religious or not, where do we all come from? The universe. Yeah, so in other words, when you're fighting against truth and you're fighting against the universe, you're essentially fighting against yourself. And we belong in a place that's characterized by truth. So once we stop living by truth, we're now living in a place that is completely contrary to our actual nature. And then surprise, surprise, we feel like we don't belong. Well, you don't belong. If you're a liar, then you don't belong in a universe that's governed by truth. If you're a truth teller, you don't belong in a universe that's governed by lies. So it makes sense that if we're living in an abject way, that we suddenly feel like we don't belong where we are. It makes sense. Now, you can be living, let's say, morally in a very immoral place, and you can feel like you don't belong in that place, but you still belong in the universe, and you can still gather that feeling. But if you're living badly, then you don't belong anywhere. And so it's worth considering that if you feel out of place, that might be, it's one of those two things. Maybe you're out of place because you're so different from the people where you're from, and I mean that like in a character sense, or because you're out of step with the universe. So this is why people who try to get you to say things that aren't true, they don't really care what you think. An example I used during second period, if you remember that thing from last week, 2 + 2 = 5. And I genuinely heard this happen in front of me, a conversation where one person was insisting that this can be true, another person insisting, no, it can't be. And the person who was insisting it was true said that the other person was a racist homophobe because they believed that 2 + 2 = 4. They genuinely said that. And you could sit there and try to watch them make these things fit, but man, it takes a lot of gymnastics. And essentially what it comes down to is it says, well, we just have to restructure what we mean by 2 and what we mean by 5. And if we do that, well then yes, we can make it. In other words, if 2 no longer means 2, let's say that 2 now means 2.5. Well then 2.5 + 2.5 = 5. So yes, 2 + 2 can equal 4. Questions? Now, any of us who are thinking say, well, that's stupid. Yeah, you can make anything mean anything if you just change the words. And they go, that's exactly our point. They've made no point at all about truth. All they've tried to do is to confuse you. So again, it makes me highly suspicious of people who try to use language to confuse you. Language is designed to clarify, not to confuse. If it's used to confuse, then it's being used against its proper functions. So be very careful of people who do stuff like this, because here's the thing. They really, really genuinely don't care what you think. They don't care if you think this thing. They only care if you say it. And because by saying it, then you're giving in to them, and you're letting them control you. And that's what they're really after, is control. It's not truth. They're not trying to be in harmony with the universe. They're trying to control the universe. Once again, if it's a fight between you and the universe, I love you. I got to pay you guys, if you remember what this means. But I'm not going to bet on you. I'm going to bet on the universe. The universe always wins out, which means the truth always wins out. And that's why they're not trying to get in line with the truth. They're trying to control it. This is pride. Because we're so advanced today, we're so smart today because we have social media now. So now we are so smart and wise that we can control the foundations of the universe. I've seen this play out before. It never works well. And so what it is that they want you to do is, again, just to say what they want you to say. They don't care, by the way, they don't care if you apply 2 + 2 = 4 in real life. In other words, if you're making a bridge, or if you're building an airplane and you have to use mathematics to do that, they don't really care if you use real mathematics to do that, because they want the bridges to stand, they want the planes to fly. So they don't care if you actually do this thing in real life. They just don't want, and they don't really care if you think it's true. They just want you to say that it's true. But if you do that, you're going to pay a price, of course, because you're going to realize that what you're saying and thinking and doing are not in harmony. And you would rightfully now question your own integrity and question your value as a person. Rightfully so. Because it should cause you to ask yourself, how can they get me to say something that's so obviously contrary to the truth? Why would I go along with that? It's just easier. Is that the purpose of your life? Easiness? Simplicity? Because if it was, I don't know why any of us are here. Why aren't we just laying in bed all day? Is the purpose of our life to feel good? If so, why aren't we just drunk in bed all day? It seems like that would be the better way to go, but we realize intuitively that that's not the function of life. That's not the purpose of life. We realize that there's something much deeper there, and that is to live in accordance with the truth. And so, if you go against the truth, it's going to cost you that. Then again, if you go along with the truth, it's going to cost you that. Again, I heard this person getting called a racist homophobe because they believe that 2 + 2 = 4. And who knows whatever happened to that person? Do they get doxxed? Do they get harassed online? Do they get people calling their boss, trying to get them fired from their jobs? Does the outrage mob show up and try to cancel you? It's going to cost you sometimes to tell the truth. It's also going to cost you to live in a world in which you don't tell the truth. Stop me if you've heard this before. That's because life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer. You get to choose what you're going to suffer for. And I guess that's the question. What are you going to suffer for? Are you going to suffer for the truth? Or are you going to suffer for lies? You're going to suffer either way. It almost seems like it might be better to suffer in alignment with the universe. Because at the very least, you know that your suffering has a purpose and has an ultimate defense, which is the nature of reality itself. Yeah.
I was going to say, what you said right now reminds me of what Kobe did last class. Love this trick the devil would say was to basically pretend he doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, these are characteristics of the devil. Like, they're trying to confuse you, to make you doubt, and tell you half-truths, just to, and this is what evil is. They're trying to basically confuse you and make you doubt the truth.
Yeah. Remember, the truth is the thing that builds the universe up. The lies are the things that try to tear down what the universe is. I've talked about that before, that what it is to be a God is to create. This is what gods do. Gods create. In every major religion, this is what's being expressed through these major world religions. The idea that God is somebody who takes chaos and makes order out of it. Then what's a devil? It's a person who undoes the process, takes order and tries to create chaos out of it. 2 plus 2 clearly equals 4. Well, but not if you look at it this way. Let's redefine some words. Well, yeah, if you redefine words, then this is the one I'm wearing on my wrist is a banana. But that doesn't mean I can eat it. It doesn't mean it's got potassium in it. You know, but it could be called a banana. Yeah, wonderful. Like any third grader could come up with that idea. In fact, they do. And it doesn't take a lot to tear down, because any third grader could also, if you gave him a sledgehammer, destroy the statue of David by Michelangelo. But no third grader could create Michelangelo. In fact, no third grader could create David by Michelangelo. No third grader could create, a Cezanne painting. But if you gave him a sledgehammer, every third grader could destroy it. It doesn't take much to destroy. That's why it doesn't take much for us to find the problems in the world and sit there and scratch our chins and frown and just be like, the world is so messed up. Look at all these problems. Wow. You're so deep, you can find problems. You can walk outside on the street and find problems. And I guess my curiosity is, can you walk out on the street and find beauty? That takes something. That takes genius. Not that it's not there, but because we're so programmed not to find it. It's not because we have to invent it. It's because we have to swim our way through this thick layer of enculturation, I guess, or a thick layer of just our whole lives being fed this thing about how many problems there are. I mean, really think about it. How often do people come to you with good things, or how often do people complain to you about the problems of life? People who find problems, but they're just problems, man. But the people who can find beauty in things and can find solutions and can create, those are geniuses. There's a reason that we take artists and we hold them up so high. Because these are the people who take chaos and they make order out of it. They take a whole palette of a smear of paints, and then when they get done, Van Gogh stands there and looks at it. We have the couple walking on the road, if you remember the painting from a couple weeks ago. That's order. They take chaos and they make order out of it. This is why we admire our musicians so much. That's why there's a whole festival right now going on out in Coachella. Because these are people who go out and they take these notes, these abstract sounds, and then they reorder them in such a way they make a song out of it. And somehow, some way, that line of reordered notes speaks to us at a human level. They've taken chaos and they've made order out of it. But in order to do that, of course, the artist has to live in the chaos, which is why there's such chaotic personalities. And so what they do is something for the rest of us. They go out, they live in the chaos, they survive it, they come back and they tell us about it, and sometimes, if we're lucky, they give us a really catchy chorus along with it. And then that becomes like the soundtrack of our youth. That becomes the soundtrack of your adulthood. It becomes the soundtrack of some of the most beautiful experiences of your life, and also the soundtrack of some of the most miserable experiences of your life. But every experience of your life has a soundtrack, doesn't it? You'll go back to it, and you can understand that right now. There are songs right now that you listen to, and you'll be like, oh my God, I remember this song, back in the day. Remember 9th grade? It reminds you of that. And I'm sure you have parents and so who listen to songs and go, man, I remember the 90s. They're lucky if they did. Or maybe they live it fully if they remember it. But you get the idea. And so it's getting in harmony with the truth. And harmony, of course, by the way, is itself a musical term. Yeah.
How about the 2 + 2 = 5? Like, it reminded me how, like, people would say that the earth is flat.
Yeah. Yeah, people insist that the earth is flat. I know a very, very smart dude. Oh, sorry, scratch that. I know a guy who's really, really good at jiu-jitsu and business who believes that the earth is flat. He also, by the way, believes that dinosaurs don't exist. He believes that that the fossils that we find are actually planted there by university researchers because they're trying to get research dollars to give themselves jobs. He genuinely believes this, like in his soul. And the guy's worth millions of dollars. It's really funny. Yeah. If you believe absurdities, man. But, you know, I'll leave it at that with who he is. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Friday. Neato.